City Girl versus Ruthless Corporation. Can love and courage save the farm? Emma Reed stepped out of the rental car with a sharp exhale, as if the air itself had weight here. It smelled different, damp earth, livestock, something raw and unfiltered that clung to her skin immediately. She shut the car door harder than necessary and looked up at what was now legally hers. The farmhouse stood slightly crooked against the gray sky, its paint peeled to dull wood, windows clouded with dust. The fence that framed the property sagged in uneven lines, broken in places, barely doing its job. "This is temporary," she said under her breath, more a command than a reassurance. She walked forward, heels sinking slightly into the soft ground, already regretting her choice of shoes. Her phone had no signal. Of course it didn't. That alone was enough to make her jaw tighten. She pulled her coat closer and stepped onto the creaking porch, testing the boards before putting her full weight down. The door resisted at first, then gave with a dry groan, opening into a dim, stale interior that smelled of time and abandonment. Emma didn't step fully inside. Not yet. She stood at the threshold, scanning the space like a stranger trespassing in someone else's life. A chair lay overturned in the corner. A table still held a cracked ceramic mug. Nothing had been touched in months, maybe years. She turned away, one problem at a time. The fence first, then a call to an agent. Then she would be gone. A sharp sound cut through the quiet, a low, restless shifting. Emma frowned and stepped off the porch, walking along the edge of the property. The fence line dipped ahead, one section completely collapsed. And beyond it, movement. A cow. Not hers. It stood halfway through the broken fence, chewing slowly, entirely unbothered by the fact that it was somewhere it didn't belong. Emma stopped, staring at it as if it might explain itself. "You've got to be kidding me." The animal blinked at her, then took another step forward, fully crossing into her land. Emma exhaled sharply, pushing her hair back. No, absolutely not. I just got here." She looked around, as if someone might appear and fix this for her. No one did. The hills stretched quiet and indifferent in every direction. Then she heard footsteps. Not soft, not hesitant. Heavy, deliberate, approaching from the neighboring property. Emma turned. He came into view from behind a line of trees, moving with the kind of certainty that didn't ask permission from the land beneath his feet. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn work clothes that looked like they had never been clean in the first place. His gaze locked onto the broken fence first, then shifted to the cow, and only then, to her. There was no greeting. He stopped a few steps away, eyes narrowing slightly as if assessing damage. "That yours?" Emma asked, folding her arms, forcing her voice into something steady. His eyes flicked to her, expression unreadable. "That's my fence you didn't fix." Emma blinked once, slow. "Excuse me." He walked past her without waiting for permission, straight to the broken section, crouching down to inspect it. His movements were efficient, practiced. He didn't look at her again as he spoke. It was holding yesterday. Emma let out a short, disbelieving breath. "I arrived 10 minutes ago." That made him pause, just for a second. Then he stood, turning to face her fully for the first time. His gaze swept over her. Coat too clean, shoes wrong for the ground, posture stiff with irritation. "Figures," he muttered. Something in his tone snapped the thin thread of her patience. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" He gestured toward the fence with a curt motion. "Yeah, this. And now my livestock's wandering because of it." Emma took a step forward, anger sharpening her voice. "Your livestock wandered because your fence is broken." He stared at her for a beat, then let out a low, humorless breath. "That fence line is shared." Not anymore, apparently. The cow shifted behind them, knocking lightly against another weak post. Both of them turned instinctively at the sound. He moved first, grabbing the animal's lead with practiced ease, guiding it back toward the gap. Emma watched, jaw tight, arms still crossed like armor. "You going to stand there?" he said without looking at her. "Or help?" The question hung in the air, not quite an offer, not quite a demand. Emma hesitated. Pride flared immediately. She wasn't here to play farmer. She wasn't here to fix fences or chase livestock. But the cow pushed again against the broken wood, and the structure gave another inch. With a frustrated exhale, she stepped forward. "Fine. What do I do?" He nodded once toward a loose plank. "Hold that steady." She grabbed it, the rough wood scraping against her palms. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't controlled. It was messy and awkward, and she hated how unfamiliar it felt. He worked quickly, repositioning posts, tying temporary support with a length of wire he pulled from his pocket. Their movements didn't sync at first. She reacted too late, he adjusted too fast. But within minutes, a rough rhythm formed. Not smooth, not cooperative, just functional enough to keep the fence from collapsing further. When it was done, he stepped back, assessing it with a critical eye. Temporary. That's all it needs to be, Emma said immediately, releasing the plank and brushing her hands off. I'm not staying. That got his attention. He looked at her again, more directly this time. No. No, she lifted her chin slightly. I'm selling. A pause. Then a slight shift in his expression, not surprise, not approval. Something else. Calculation, maybe. Good luck with that, he said flatly. Emma frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past her again, leading the cow back through the gap, now loosely secured. Only when he reached the other side did he stop and glance over his shoulder. Means, he said, voice even. You've got more than a broken fence to deal with. Emma's irritation flared again. If you have something to say, say it. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then shook his head once, dismissive. You'll figure it out. And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing back toward his land as if the conversation had already ended the moment he decided it had. Emma stood there, staring after him, anger simmering under her skin. She looked back at the fence, at the farmhouse beyond it, at the empty stretch of land that now felt less like an asset and more like a challenge she hadn't agreed to. This is temporary, she repeated, quieter this time. But the words didn't carry the same certainty anymore. Emma stood in the middle of the farmhouse kitchen, staring at the stack of papers spread across the table as if they might rearrange themselves into something reasonable. They didn't. The language was precise, suffocatingly so, clauses nested inside clauses, conditions tied to obligations she hadn't anticipated. She flipped another page, jaw tightening. Property transfer conditional upon restoration to functional agricultural standard. No, she said aloud, sharper than intended. No, that's not happening. She pushed the papers away, pacing the length of the room. The floor creaked under each step, the sound getting under her skin. Her plan had been simple: arrive, sign, list, sell. Clean. Controlled. Done. This was neither clean nor controlled. Her phone still showed no signal. She had driven 15 minutes down the narrow road earlier just to get one bar and call a lawyer, only to hear the same thing repeated in a calm, apologetic tone. Until the property met basic operational standards, no buyer could legally finalize a purchase. Liability issues. Zoning compliance. Agricultural designation. In other words, she was stuck. Emma stopped pacing and looked around again, this time not as a visitor, but as someone trapped in a negotiation she hadn't agreed to. The sink was dry. The pipes groaned when she tried the tap earlier, producing nothing but a weak cough of air. The back door didn't close properly. Half the windows wouldn't open. Functional, she muttered. Define functional. A sudden clang from outside snapped her attention toward the window. She stepped closer, pushing aside the thin curtain. The fence line groaned as another section sagged. Emma watched from the porch, realizing the makeshift wire wouldn't hold through the night. She grabbed her coat, swapping her heels for an old pair of boots she had reluctantly unpacked. Outside, the air was biting. She walked toward the fence, but the cow was already pushing through. She tried to block its path, arms out as if that would somehow redirect half a ton of stubborn animal. No, you go back. That's how this works. The cow ignored her completely, wandering deeper onto the property with slow, deliberate steps. Unbelievable. Footsteps again. Emma didn't turn immediately this time. She already knew who it was. The pace was the same, measured, unhurried, like nothing here could surprise him. You break it. His voice came from behind her, calm and flat. You fix it. Emma spun around. I didn't break it. Jack Harper stopped a few feet away, gaze flicking from the open gap to the cow now comfortably exploring Emma's land. Looks worse than yesterday. Because it is worse than yesterday, she shot back. It collapsed while I was trying to fix your problem. He tilted his head slightly. My problem. Yes, your problem. Your cow. Your fence. Your. She gestured vaguely at everything around them, frustration spilling over. entire situation. For a moment, he just looked at her. Not angry, not defensive, just assessing. Right, he said finally, tone unchanged. That single word landed heavier than any argument. Emma crossed her arms again, holding his gaze. You could have mentioned the fence was about to fall apart. You could have checked it. I just got here. And it's your land. The words were simple, direct, annoyingly logical. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it again, irritation tightening in her chest. Behind them, the cow knocked over a loose bucket with a hollow clang. Jack glanced back briefly, then stepped past Emma without another word, moving toward the animal. His movements were efficient again, practiced, as if this exact situation had played out too many times to count. Emma watched him work, jaw set. He didn't rush, didn't react emotionally, just handled it. Here, he said after a moment, nodding toward the fallen plank again. Emma didn't move. He looked up at her, one brow lifting slightly. Not impatient, expectant. The silence stretched just long enough to make it a choice. Emma exhaled sharply through her nose and stepped forward, grabbing the plank again. This time, her grip was firmer despite the discomfort. Hold it steady, he said. I remember, she replied curtly. They worked again, the same rough coordination as before, but there was less hesitation now. Not smoother, just more direct. She anticipated his movements a fraction earlier. He adjusted without comment. When the plank was secured, barely, Jack tightened the wire with a final pull and stepped back. This won't last. I don't need it to, Emma said immediately. I just need it to pass inspection. That made him pause. Inspection? Yes. She brushed her hands off again, ignoring the sting. Apparently, I can't sell the place unless it's functional. He let out a quiet breath, something almost like recognition passing through his expression. Yeah. Emma frowned. You knew? Everyone knows. Everyone except me, she snapped. He didn't respond to that. Just looked at the fence again, then at the house beyond it. You planning to fix all of it? He asked. No, Emma said instantly. I'm planning to do the minimum required and leave. Another pause. Minimum won't cut it, he said. Her irritation flared again. I didn't ask for your opinion. Didn't give it. His gaze shifted back to her, steady. Just telling you how it works. Emma held his eyes, something stubborn rising in her chest. I'll figure it out. For a second, it almost sounded like a challenge. Jack seemed to catch that. His expression didn't change much, but something in his posture shifted, less dismissive, more watchful. Sure, he said. The word wasn't agreement. It was distance. He turned again, ready to leave just like before. Wait, Emma said, the word slipping out before she could stop it. He paused, glancing back. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then forced the question out. If I were to fix it properly, where would I even start? Silence. Not long. Just enough to make it clear he hadn't expected that. His gaze held hers, searching for something. Pride, maybe. Or doubt. Water, he said finally. If your system's dead, nothing else matters. Emma blinked. The answer was so straightforward it almost irritated her more. That's it. That's first. She nodded slowly, committing it despite herself. Jack studied her for another second, then gave a short, almost imperceptible nod toward the house. Pump's probably shot. Check the well line. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away again, disappearing past the tree line without another word. Emma stood there, the quiet settling back around her. Water. She looked toward the farmhouse, then down at her hands, slightly scraped. Dirt under her nails now. Fine, she said quietly. Water. It wasn't a plan, but it was a start. The well cover was heavier than it looked. Emma braced her boots against the damp ground and pulled again, muscles protesting as the wooden lid scraped against its frame with a dull, stubborn groan. It shifted an inch, then another. Come on, she muttered, tightening her grip. With a final effort, the cover slid aside just enough to expose the dark opening beneath. A faint, stale smell rose from it. Wet stone, old water, something metallic underneath. Emma leaned slightly closer, peering down, but the depths swallowed the light too quickly. Great, she said under her breath. Very helpful. She straightened, brushing her hands off against her jeans, already feeling the strain in her arms. The pump system sat a few feet away, a rusted assembly of pipes and joints that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Water first. She walked over and crouched beside it, scanning for anything obvious. Loose connections, broken seals, something she could fix without dismantling the entire structure. There was none. Just age. Neglect. Emma reached out and twisted one of the valves. It resisted, then gave suddenly with a sharp jerk that nearly threw her off balance. Nothing happened. No sound. No movement. She tried again, slower this time, listening carefully. A faint rattle echoed through the pipe. Dry, hollow, wrong. Dead, she concluded quietly. A car engine in the distance broke the stillness. Emma stood, turning toward the narrow road that cut past the property. A dark vehicle approached, slower than normal traffic would move, tires crunching deliberately over gravel. It didn't pass. It stopped, right by her gate. Emma didn't move immediately. She watched instead, her posture stiffening as the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, maybe older. Clean. Too clean for this place. His coat was pressed, his shoes untouched by mud despite the road. He closed the door with controlled precision, then looked directly at her, as if he had known exactly where she would be. Emma felt it immediately, that shift in the air. Not surprise. Not curiosity. Intent. He walked toward her without hesitation, stopping just short of the fence line. His gaze swept briefly over the farmhouse, the land, the patched section of wood, taking inventory. "Miss Reed," he said, voice smooth, measured. Emma didn't ask how he knew her name. "Can I help you?" A faint smile touched his lips, polite but empty. "I believe I can help you." She crossed her arms, grounding herself. That would be a first today. His eyes flickered with something. Amusement, maybe, but it didn't reach the rest of his face. "I represent a company interested in this land." Emma's expression didn't change. "It's not for sale." "It will be," he replied calmly. The certainty in his tone irritated her more than the words themselves. "Not today." He inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging a minor inconvenience. "These things take time." Emma stepped closer to the fence, closing the distance just enough to make her point clearer. "Then you're wasting yours." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he shifted his attention past her, toward the pump system, the open well. "Water issues?" he asked casually. Emma didn't answer. He looked back at her, the faint smile returning. "This property requires significant restoration before any legal transaction can proceed." Her jaw tightened. "I'm aware." "Of course you are." He adjusted his coat slightly, a small, controlled movement. "Which is why I'm offering you a simpler solution." Emma said nothing. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder, holding it out. Not crossing the fence, not stepping closer. Just enough to make it clear she would have to come to him to take it. She didn't. After a second, he continued. "A direct purchase. Immediate. No conditions." "How generous," Emma said flatly. "It's practical," he corrected. "For both of us." She glanced at the folder, then back at him. "And what's the catch?" "No catch." His tone didn't change. "Just an understanding that this land will be developed in a way that benefits the region." Emma let out a short, humorless breath. "Right." He studied her for a moment longer, then lowered the folder slightly. "You'll find that maintaining this property alone is demanding." "I'll manage." "Perhaps." Another pause. This one longer. His gaze sharpened just enough to make the shift noticeable. But it would be unfortunate if circumstances made it more difficult than necessary. There it was. Not a threat. Not directly. But close enough that Emma felt it settle under her skin anyway. She held his gaze, refusing to step back. "Are you trying to intimidate me?" "Not at all." His expression remained composed. "I'm offering clarity." Emma didn't look away. "Here's mine. I'm not selling." For the first time, the smile faded completely. Not replaced with anger, just absence. He nodded once, slow. "Very well." He slipped the folder back into his coat, as if the conversation had reached a natural conclusion. Then he turned slightly, already preparing to leave. At the car, he paused, one hand resting on the door. "You may reconsider," he said without looking back. "Most people do." Emma didn't respond. He got in, closed the door, and the engine started again, the sound fading as the car disappeared down the road. The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. Emma stood still for a moment, then exhaled slowly, forcing the tension out of her shoulders. "Great," she muttered. "Just great." A figure appeared at the edge of her vision. She turned. Jack stood near the tree line again, arms loosely at his sides, watching the empty road where the car had been moments ago. "You know him?" Emma asked. Jack didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted from the road to her, then to the open well behind her. "That was what," he said finally. Emma frowned. And he doesn't show up unless he thinks he's already won." The words settled between them, quiet but solid. Emma glanced back toward the road, then at the pump system again. "Well, he's wrong." Jack studied her for a second, something unreadable in his expression. "Maybe," he said. "Not agreement. Not doubt. Just possibility." Emma straightened slightly, squaring her shoulders. "I'm fixing this place. Selling it. And leaving." Jack's gaze held hers, steady, unblinking. "Then start moving faster," he said. "Because he will." He turned before she could respond, disappearing again into the trees, leaving her alone with the broken system, the silent house, and the echo of a conversation that had shifted everything without raising its voice. Emma looked down at the rusted pump, then back toward the road one last time. Water first. But now it wasn't just about selling anymore. Now it was about not losing before she even understood the rules. The pipe split sometime after midnight. Emma woke to a sharp, irregular knocking, the sound of the pump laboring against a blockage, followed by a violent, metallic crack. She grabbed her flashlight and ran to the utility room, where a fracture had opened near the base. Water wasn't just leaking, it was pulsing out with every frantic stroke of the old pump. "How?" she whispered, sliding on the wet floor. She had tried the tap earlier, and the system had been bone dry. Now, the gauge on the rusted tank was pinned in the red. Someone had manually primed the pump from the outside and cranked the pressure bypass until the aging iron couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't an accident. It was a pressurized assault on the house's foundation. Emma fought the main valve, but it felt jammed wide open. Realizing the water wouldn't stop until the pressure destroyed the room, she grabbed her coat and ran for the only person who knew the layout of the old lines. But not dismissal either. Emma folded her arms, the chill from her damp sleeves seeping through. "That's not exactly reassuring." "No," he said. Another pause. This one different. The urgency was gone now, replaced by something quieter. The two of them stood in the same small space, the aftermath of the problem settling around them. Emma shifted slightly, lowering the flashlight. "Thanks." The word felt unfamiliar. Jack looked at her briefly, then nodded once. "It'll hold for now." "For now," she repeated. He moved toward the door, stopping just short of it. "You'll need to replace the section and check the rest of the line." Emma leaned against the wall, exhaustion creeping in now that the adrenaline had faded. One thing at a time. Jack's gaze flicked to her, lingering for a fraction longer than before. "Yeah," he said. He stepped out into the night without another word. Emma stayed where she was, listening to the quiet drip that had replaced the chaos. Water first. She looked down at the fractured pipe, then at the damp floor stretching into the hallway. This wasn't just maintenance anymore. This was resistance. By morning, the floor had dried unevenly, leaving warped lines across the wood. Emma stood in the doorway of the utility room, arms folded. The temporary fix held, but the metal looked thin and unreliable. She knew Jack was right. It needed a permanent solution. She went to the shed and found a sturdier section of pipe, but as she tried to fit it, the tools felt heavy and foreign in her hands. She struggled with the wrench, the metal teeth slipping and scraping the pipe. Jack appeared in the doorway just as she was about to give up. He didn't take the tool from her immediately. Instead, he reached over her shoulder, adjusting the angle of her grip. "Leverage," he muttered. "Not just force." Under his steady guidance, she felt the joint finally catch and tighten. When they finished, the system sat silent and dry. He gave a short, single nod toward her work. "It'll do," he said, and for the first time, Emma didn't feel the need to correct his lack of enthusiasm. He didn't offer to redo it, and Emma realized that was the highest praise she was going to get. "You'll need feed," he said. Emma frowned. "Feed? For the animals." He glanced back at her. "Or are you planning to let them wander until they're not your problem anymore?" "They're not my animals," she replied immediately. "They're on your land." That again. Emma straightened, irritation flickering but weaker now. "I'll figure it out." Jack held her gaze for a moment, then looked past her toward the yard. "Store in town won't sell to you." The statement landed wrong. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why not?" He didn't answer directly. "Try it." A pause. Then he stepped outside, leaving the door open behind him. Emma stayed where she was for a second, processing. Then she grabbed her keys. The drive into town was short but uneven. the road cutting through fields that looked too quiet, too distant from anything familiar. Emma kept her focus forward, jaw set, replaying Jack's words in her head. Won't sell to you. We'll see. The store was small, functional, exactly what she expected. Wooden exterior, a faded sign, trucks parked out front. She stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing once, sharp in the stillness. The man behind the counter looked up. His expression didn't change much. Emma walked up, placing her hands lightly on the counter. I need livestock feed. A pause. The man glanced briefly toward the back room, then back at her. We're out. Emma blinked once. Out. Shipment's late. She glanced over his shoulder. The shelves behind him were lined. Full. Her gaze returned to his. Right, she said slowly. Another pause. Neither of them moved. Then Emma nodded once, stepping back. Understood. She turned and walked out without another word. Back in the car, her hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Not out. Not late. Blocked. Emma exhaled slowly, forcing the tension down. When she pulled back onto the road, she didn't head straight for the farmhouse. She turned toward the neighboring land. Jack was near the fence when she arrived, working on a section further down the line. He didn't look up immediately when she approached. They wouldn't sell to me, she said without preamble. He kept working for another second, then straightened slowly, wiping his hands against his jacket. I know. Emma crossed her arms. You could have led with that. You needed to see it. She held his gaze, frustration flickering again, but it didn't settle the same way as before. They're working with him, she said. Jack didn't deny it. Yeah. A brief silence stretched between them, different from the earlier ones. More aligned. Emma shifted her weight slightly. So what now? Jack studied her for a moment, then gestured toward his land. I've got extra, he said. Feed. Supplies. Emma hesitated. The offer sat between them, simple but not light. Not charity. Not obligation. A choice. Her pride rose immediately, then paused, then adjusted. Temporary, she said. Jack gave a short nod. Temporary. Another pause. Then Emma stepped forward, closing the distance by one deliberate step. Fine, she said. We share. Something in his expression shifted, not softer, not warmer. Just less closed. Fine, he replied. It was an agreement. It was the beginning of something else. The box was older than the rest of the house. Emma found it by accident, wedged behind a loose panel in the study, a room she had ignored until now because it felt too intact, too personal. Unlike the rest of the farmhouse, this space hadn't been stripped down by time. Books still lined the shelves. Papers were stacked with deliberate order. It felt occupied. She hadn't planned to touch anything here. But the panel had shifted when she moved a chair, exposing the edge of something hidden behind it. That alone was enough to pull her attention. Now she stood in the center of the room, the box resting on the desk in front of her. Wooden, reinforced at the corners. Locked. Of course it's locked, she muttered. Emma ran her fingers along the edge, testing it. No key nearby. No obvious way to open it without force. She hesitated for a second, then reached for a tool. The lock gave after a few controlled strikes. Not clean, not elegant, but effective. The metal snapped loose, falling onto the desk with a dull clink. Emma paused, listening. Nothing. She lifted the lid. Inside, files. Not random. Organized. Labeled. Her grandfather's handwriting. Emma's chest tightened slightly at the sight of it. A brief flicker of something she didn't have time to process. She pushed it aside, focusing instead on the content. She pulled out the first folder, flipping it open. Documents. Reports. Dates spanning years. Her eyes moved quickly over the text, then slowed as she saw a letter dated 2 months before her grandfather's death. It was a formal warning from Watt's legal team, threatening a defamation suit that would strip him of the farm if he went public. Attached to it were her grandfather's notes. They think an old man can be silenced by a piece of paper. I've spent 40 years on this soil. I won't let them poison it for the next 40. If the courts won't listen, the evidence will have to wait for someone who can't be bought. Emma's grip on the paper tightened. He hadn't been silent out of fear. He had been documenting every chemical discharge and unregulated spill, waiting for a moment when the truth could actually land a blow. He hadn't just owned this land. He had been its last line of defense. He had been building a case. A sharp knock at the front door cut through the silence. Emma froze. The sound came again, louder this time. She closed the box immediately, sliding the files back inside with quick, controlled movements. The lid shut, the broken lock hanging loose but ignored. Another knock. Misread. The voice carried through the door. Calm. Familiar. Emma's jaw tightened. She moved quickly, lifting the box and sliding it back behind the panel, forcing the wood into place just enough to conceal it again. Not perfect, but not obvious either. The knock came a third time. Emma stepped out of the study, closing the door behind her, her expression already set back into something neutral. When she opened the front door, what stood exactly where she expected him to be. Same coat, same controlled posture, same calm. You're persistent, she said. He inclined his head slightly. Efficient. Emma didn't step aside. What do you want? His gaze moved past her briefly, scanning the interior, then returned to her. A conversation. We had one. And yet, he said smoothly, you're still here. Emma held his gaze. That's not changing. A brief pause. Then he smiled again. Not warmer, just sharper. I wonder, he said, if you fully understand what you've inherited. The words hit closer than she liked. Emma kept her expression steady. A broken farm. More than that. Silence stretched for a moment. Emma didn't fill it. Neither did he. Then, you've been busy. What continued? His eyes flicking toward the yard, the repaired sections, the subtle signs of work. Progress. Impressive. Don't sound surprised. I'm not, he said. Just realistic. Emma crossed her arms slightly. Get to the point. Another pause. Then, quieter. You're holding something. The shift was subtle, but clear. Emma didn't react. No. His gaze didn't leave her face. This land isn't valuable because of what it is, he said. It's valuable because of what's buried in it. Emma felt the tension tighten, sharp and immediate. Then dig, she replied. What watched her for another second, measuring something she couldn't see. Then he nodded once. As you wish. He stepped back from the door, the movement controlled, deliberate. Just remember, he added, some things are easier to sell than to protect. Emma didn't respond. He turned and walked away, the same as before, no rush, no hesitation. But this time, the silence he left behind didn't feel neutral. It felt targeted. Emma closed the door slowly, her grip tightening slightly on the handle. For a second, she stood there, listening to the quiet settle again. Then she moved. Fast. Back to the study. She pulled the panel aside, grabbing the box and setting it back on the desk. This time, she didn't hesitate. She opened it again, flipping through the files with sharper focus. This wasn't just leverage. This was exposure. Proof that could destroy everything what was building. A floorboard creaked behind her. Emma turned instantly. Jack stood in the doorway. He didn't look surprised. Just alert. How long have you been there? She asked. Long enough. His gaze dropped to the open files, then back to her. What is it? Emma hesitated. This was the line. Before, everything had been parallel. Separate. Now, she picked up one of the documents and held it out to him. Read. Jack stepped forward, taking the paper. His eyes moved quickly over the text, his expression tightening by degrees, not outwardly, but in the small shifts that mattered. When he finished, he didn't look up immediately. He turned the page. Then another. Silence stretched. Then, this is real, he said. Not a question. Emma nodded once. Years of it. Jack finally looked at her. You just found this? Yes. Another pause. Then something shifted. Not in the room. Between them. Before, it had been proximity. Necessity. Now, it was alignment. They'll come for it, Jack said. Emma didn't hesitate this time. I know. Silence again. Shorter. Sharper. Then Jack folded the document carefully, placing it back on the desk. You don't keep this here, he said. No, Emma agreed. Another pause. Then, simpler, clearer than anything before. We move it, he said. Emma met his gaze. No hesitation now. No, she replied. Jack's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. No. Emma shook her head once. We use it. A beat. Then another. Jack studied her, weighing the decision. This wasn't repair work. This wasn't temporary. This was escalation. Finally, he gave a slow nod. Then we do it right, he said. Emma's grip on the edge of the desk steadied. Together, she added. The words settled between them, heavier than expected. Jack held her gaze for a second longer. Then, yeah, not agreement. Commitment. The fire started silently. At first, just a faint smell, smoke curling along the edge of the barn door. Emma noticed it while checking the perimeter, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She froze, heart tightening immediately. Jack was already moving, silent and swift, when she turned to alert him. He didn't need words. His pace quickened, boots crunching over gravel, hands gripping the extinguisher by the door. Emma followed, adrenaline sharpening her focus. The flames had begun at one corner, small at first, licking along the dry wood with a hungry orange glow. Heat radiated instantly, and the smell of burning timber filled the night air. "Water!" Jack barked. Emma darted toward the hose, fumbling with the nozzle as Jack pulled it from the reel. The pressure was weak at first, sputtering, then steadied after a few seconds. They sprayed the fire together, Emma aiming while Jack guided the stream closer to the base. Sparks flew, embers scattered across the barn's roof. A loud crack echoed as a support beam splintered. Emma stumbled backward, almost tripping over the hose. She scrambled up, heart hammering. Jack leaned over, spraying with controlled bursts. "Keep going. Don't stop." Minutes passed like hours. Each section doused seemed to ignite another. Sweat ran down Emma's face, mixing with soot, grime, and the sharp tang of smoke. Her lungs burned, her arms ached, but she kept spraying. Jack moved closer, shoulder brushing hers as they coordinated the stream. "Step back. Angle it lower," he shouted. Emma adjusted instantly, their motions becoming synchronized, instinctive. No words now, only action. The flames roared, but finally, the larger fire began to shrink. Smoke thickened, curling upward in heavy clouds. Heat licked their faces, but the barn stopped growing, the fire contained to the center. Emma lowered the hose slightly, catching her breath. "We were doing it." Jack didn't respond immediately. His eyes were sharp, scanning for hidden sparks, planning next moves. Then, almost imperceptibly, his gaze flicked to hers. In the moment, something shifted, raw adrenaline, fear, and relief mixing. A small ember floated past, landing on her sleeve. Instinctively, Jack brushed it off. Their hands touched briefly, then lingered longer than necessary. Neither moved away immediately. Emma swallowed hard, chest still pounding. "That could have been it," she said quietly. Jack nodded, still focused on the remaining flames. Almost. Another crack, then smoke thickened again. They pushed forward, spraying together, each guiding the other silently, instinctively. The fire hissed and sputtered under the water, then began to die, leaving smoldering wood, blackened walls, and a thick cloud of smoke curling into the night. Finally, the flames were contained. No more roaring. No more dancing orange. Only smoke and heat. Emma dropped the hose, panting, sweat mixing with the soot on her face. She glanced at Jack. He was drenched, exhausted, but unshaken. There was a new understanding in the way he looked at her now, not just a neighbor or helper, but a partner. "Are you insane?" she said, voice shaking with adrenaline. Jack gave a small, grim smile. "Maybe, or maybe just not afraid to get dirty." They stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, watching the smoldering barn. The danger had passed, but the tension between them remained, thick, charged, undeniable. Emma's hand brushed against her side as she adjusted her jacket. She felt it, the first spark of something more than shared struggle. She looked up, meeting Jack's gaze, and for the first time, there was no pretense between them. No walls, no distance, just the quiet understanding that after tonight, nothing would be the same. Jack exhaled slowly, finally relaxing slightly. "You okay?" Emma nodded, though her voice caught. Yeah, I'm okay." He gave a small nod, letting the words settle. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "We make a good team." Emma's lips quirked slightly, a hint of a smile breaking through the soot and fatigue. "Yeah, we do." And for the first time, the farm didn't feel like a burden. Not tonight. Not after surviving the fire. Tonight, it felt like a foundation, messy, dangerous, but ours. Together. The smoke curled higher into the sky, drifting away over the fields, carrying with it the remnants of destruction and the quiet promise of something new. The town had turned cold overnight. Emma realized it before she even saw the sheriff's car parked outside her property. The neighbors who used to wave or nod as she passed now avoided her gaze. Windows closed. Doors shut. Even the usual morning chatter at the general store was replaced by silence. Jack stood beside her as they walked down the driveway, his expression hard, eyes scanning the horizon. "They've been warned," he said quietly. "No one wants trouble." Emma nodded, folding her arms. "Or they've been paid." Jack didn't respond immediately. He had that look again, the one that weighed the situation without giving anything away. Finally, he said, "Both." The sheriff stepped out of his car as they approached, hands resting loosely on the belt. He gave a polite nod to Jack, then looked at Emma. "Miss Reed." Emma forced a calm tone. "Morning, Sheriff." "Can we talk?" he asked. "About what?" she said evenly. "The barn fire," he replied. "Witnesses, complaints." Emma's heart sank slightly. She knew this was coming. Jack had warned her. "I know exactly what happened," she said firmly. "It wasn't my fault." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Jack, then back. "Still, under the law, we have to investigate." Jack stepped slightly forward. "It wasn't her. You know that." The sheriff's gaze didn't waver. "I'll be doing my job. You both need to cooperate." Emma felt the tension tighten. This wasn't just legal pressure. This was social isolation, combined with threats thinly veiled by authority. She swallowed and straightened. "Fine." The sheriff nodded, satisfied with her tone, then turned away, already preparing to write a report. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder for a brief moment. Not intrusive, but steadying. "Don't let them push you." Emma met his gaze. "I won't." They walked back toward the house, the empty fields around them stretching like cold silence. Emma could feel it, the subtle shift in the town. Doors that used to open now stayed shut. Smiles that were once polite now vanished. Back at the farmhouse, she looked out the window and saw movement at the far edge of the yard, figures gathering near the tree line, watching. Not neighbors. Too deliberate, too coordinated. Jack noticed her glance. "They're testing you," he said quietly, "trying to see if you'll back down." "I won't," Emma replied firmly. "Good." His jaw tightened slightly. "Because if you do, they'll come harder." Emma turned back to the house, feeling the weight of it all, the fire, the threatened isolation, the scrutiny of the town. And yet, for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. Jack's presence beside her grounded her. Shared danger had forged an understanding that didn't need words. "Feeds stored," he said, breaking the quiet. "Enough for both of us for a week, if necessary." Emma nodded. "We'll need more than a week." He gave a small, grim smile. "Then we'll make it last." They moved through the farmhouse together, checking supplies, securing doors, preparing quietly. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and the town remained still, cautious, watching. Emma realized then that leaving was an option. She could pack up, abandon the farmhouse, and escape the scrutiny, the isolation, the threats. But she didn't. She stayed. For the land. For Jack. For the fight that had already begun. And somewhere in the quiet tension of the morning, with the town watching and the wind carrying whispers through the fields, Emma felt a strange certainty settle over her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The fight wasn't over. Not by far. But for the first time, she felt ready. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the hills, and wind whipped across the fields. Inside, Jack moved quickly to secure the house. "They'll try tonight," he said. "Storm or not." By nightfall, the wind reached a howl. A window shattered, not from a branch, but from a heavy object thrown from the darkness. Water poured in, but Emma and Jack were already in position. They worked as a single unit, their silence guiding them. Every time an intruder tried to probe a weak point, they were there. Emma didn't rely on luck. She relied on the map of the house she had memorized. Jack didn't just fight. He anticipated. In the chaos, the flood from the broken window threatened the floorboards. Emma grabbed a heavy tarp, weighting it down with furniture while Jack held the breach against a shadow, trying to climb through. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, a dance of resistance against the rain and the men outside. When the last figure finally retreated into the gale, they sank to the floor, soaked and exhausted. The house was battered, but the line had held. The aftermath came quietly, almost surreal after the storm and the night of siege. News traveled fast. What's illegal actions, long hidden beneath layers of corporate protection, were now exposed. Emma had leveraged every connection she could reach in the city: journalists, former colleagues, legal contacts. The documents she and Jack had secured were irrefutable. The process was slow and grueling. Over the next few months, as Emma and Jack held their ground, The evidence they had leaked began to tear through the company's legal defenses. Investigations were launched, and finally, the headlines shifted. AgroCorp executives arrested in environmental scandal became the lead story, and the pressure on the valley finally broke. Jack stood beside her on the porch, arms folded, watching as the local papers fluttered in the wind. For once, the town seemed quiet, almost respectful, though cautious. People no longer avoided her on the streets. Instead, their eyes lingered, uncertain how to greet someone who had fought a corporation and won. Emma exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain. "It's over," she said softly. Jack gave a small nod, but his gaze never left the horizon. "Not completely. They'll try again, somewhere else." "I'll handle it," she said. Her voice carried calm determination. "I'm not leaving. Not now." They moved together through the farmhouse, checking fences, inspecting the repaired barn, and making sure everything was in order. The familiar rhythm of chores, feeding animals, tending to the land, repairing structures, felt grounding. Unlike before, every action carried purpose, no longer driven by obligation alone, but by choice. Weeks passed. The farm slowly returned to life. Livestock grazed peacefully. Crops were replanted. The fields, battered by storms and neglect, showed green shoots of recovery. Emma and Jack worked side by side, their routines synchronized. There were moments of quiet conversation, laughter at small mishaps, and occasional shared silences that no longer felt heavy. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, painting the fields in amber, Emma and Jack stood by the old fence, the one that had started it all. Jack was finishing the last section of the perimeter fence. Emma stood nearby, checking the alignment of the posts they had set together. They worked together, movements unspoken but perfectly timed, repairing what was broken. "This one," Jack said, stepping back and wiping sweat from his brow, "isn't just a fence anymore." Emma looked at him, curiosity flickering. "What is it then?" He smiled faintly, eyes softening. "A line we both protect now, not separating us, but holding what matters together." Emma's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "A new foundation," she agreed. The sky above glowed with the last light of day, soft and steady. Birds called from the trees. The farm, once neglected and threatened, thrived quietly under their care. Jack leaned against the fence, glancing at her. "We make a good team." Emma stepped closer, closing the space between them. "The best," she said, and for the first time, she felt it fully, the bond forged through fire, storm, and resistance. They looked out over the fields together, side by side, knowing that whatever came next, they faced it as one. The farm, the land, the life they had fought for, it wasn't just inherited anymore. It was built. A home, a partnership, a future. And in that moment, the fence no longer marked a boundary but a promise. They were ready to defend it, together, for everything it now represented.